Hello all, welcome back to Time to Dice Character Creation, where we sometimes make character builds that aren't about your favorite fictional characters. See, we're not completely without originality. This week, we're trying something a bit different. I was browsing the Pathfinder 2e subreddit when I came across this post by Gogus295 about the most damage you could possibly do in a single strike in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. They went through every class, ancestry, item, and spell in the game and concluded that a single strike could dish out exactly 1,524 damage. Their research was exhaustive to say the least, but I couldn't help noticing a few issues. First and foremost, the post is 3 years old, and for some reason, Gorgas didn't check the future releases for new options, which is an obvious rookie mistake. But more importantly, the analysis made a lot of assumptions. The experiment assumed that the character had access to every item in the game, a free archetype, and a team of 3 other players who served no role but to buff him. And while that's all well and good for their thought experiment, it left me with a couple of questions. And because I have a YouTube channel, that means my thought experiment is now your problem. Wait, no, come back. I promise this will be fun. At least if you like number crunching in spreadsheets, or if watching the number gets bigger triggers dopamine receptors in your brain the way it does mine. So, over the course of this video, we're going to answer a similar but very different question. How much damage can you do in a single round in Pathfinder 2nd Edition? And because I love a good tier list, I want to break it down even further. How much damage can you inflict in a single round with each class? This video will cover the Alchemist, but if it does well, we'll eventually get around to covering all of the Python classes to determine once and for all which class truly deserves the title of DPS King. So without further ado, let's get started. First things first, let's cover some ground rules. We want to see how much damage we can deal in a single round to a single creature. That means we've got 3 actions and a reaction to push the number as high as possible. Conditions like blinded, confused, or off guard won't actually add to the total, but we'll keep track of them anyway, just because it's fun. We will not, however, be counting the time before this round starts where we will be applying buffs, meaning we can apply as many buffs as we want, as long as their duration allows for the buffs to keep applying when it is the round that we're counting. Next, we need a punching bag, so meet Bob. Bob may look innocent, but trust me, he absolutely deserves everything we're about to do to him. Bob is a standard level 20 character, except for the fact that he royally ticked off Desna and got cursed with the worst luck possible. Every saving throw he makes is a critical failure. Every attack against him is a critical success. And if Bob attacks back, you can bet that he'll always roll the result that is worst for him. But that's not all. Bob is also a bit of an amalgam. He has no resistances or immunities, but he does have every trait in the game. For our purposes, he's both holy and unholy, and he has infinite health, but is always sitting at about half HP. Now, I could tell you what Bob did to deserve this fate, but it's far too horrible, and would probably get my channel demonetized and deleted from YouTube. So you're just going to have to trust me on the fact that Bob definitely deserves this. And finally, while this will be an Alchemist build, everything a typical level 20 character has access to is fair game, at least as far as the build goes. We can multi-class to grab anything from weapon progression to spellcasting, as long as it fits within a level 20 character. For equipment though, I want this number to be based entirely off of the class's own merits. So anything beyond what the build itself can produce is strictly off limits, with the exception of a +3 major striking weapon, because most damage boosts in this game scale off the number of damage dice the weapon does, and by level 20, a +3 major striking weapon is probably the bare minimum as far as equipment goes. Also, I just want the number to be high. Alright, so where do we start? We're going to cover this like our usual build guides, but we'll skip over things like skill feats and anything else that doesn't directly contribute to our damage output. So let's start with our ancestry. Looking for ancestry feats and heritage that boost our damage, I found a couple of options. Goblins have the Burn It feat, which deals extra damage with fire-based spells and alchemical items, and the Torch Goblin feat, letting them light themselves on fire to deal 1 additional fire damage per weapon damage dice. Dwarves can get Telluric Power, which adds extra damage when making a melee strike against a target standing on the same earth or stone surface. Skeletons can shoot bone missiles to add void damage to their attacks at the cost of some HP, and Duskwalkers get Quieter Strikes to get an extra point of void or vitality damage to all of their strikes. I think the best option here is to go with the Goblin Ancestry paired with the Duskwalker Heritage. We could instead create a custom mixed heritage to get a Goblin-Dwarf hybrid, because the Dwarven feat Telluric Power adds more damage than Quieter Strikes will get from the Duskwalker. However, the bonus is a Circumstance bonus, which would conflict with some of the options that we're going to be taking later in the build. Quieter Strikes, on the other hand, simply adds additional spirit or void damage, so it doesn't conflict with anything. With that out of the way, we'll move on to our backgrounds. Luckily, this is much simpler as there's a clear winner. Baited Rival is the only damage boosting background in the game, giving us +1 to attack and damage rolls against our fated rival, who of course will be Bob. For our attributes, nothing revolutionary here. We'll max out our strength to add more damage to all of our melee attacks, and intelligence to get access to more alchemical items to further boost those attacks. As we get into our class, we get our choice of research field, which is our first branch path of the build, and one I spent a great deal of time debating. At first glance, none of the research fields seemed ideal for single target burst damage. Bombers focus on dealing splash damage to multiple creatures, Chirurgeons focus on healing, Mutagenists provide polymorph effects, but most mutagens don't actually increase your damage output. Toxologists are all about poisons, which specialize in dealing damage over time rather than in a single round. It isn't until we unlock the greater field research at level 13 that the mutagenist field really shows its advantage, by allowing us to benefit from the effects of 2 different mutagens at once. While most mutagens do little for our overall damage output, this lets us double down when we find exceptions to the rule. We'll cover our alchemical selections later, but for now, rest assured that this is the correct choice. Or don't. I spent just about a week searching over every option I could find for how to build this build, but I'm still only about 60% sure that I actually got the highest number possible. In fact, I had a completely different version of this build prepared before I asked a friend, and he made me completely reconsider adding poisons to the build, which completely changed just about everything. In short, if you have a way to do more damage, I would love to see it, whether that just be an option that we didn't take for this build, or a completely different build of your own. As long as you follow the rules that I listed earlier, I am more than happy to concede defeat if some of you are a little bit smarter than I am. So, let's start covering feat selection, starting at level 1 with the Burn Ancestry feat, which gives us a status bonus to our fire damage with alchemical items and spells. Funnily enough, we won't be triggering this feat with our alchemical items at all. Instead, it'll be our spells that make this feat worth it. Now if you're thinking, but wait, alchemists don't get spells, stick around, we've got a lot to cover. By the end of this build, this feat's only going to add about 3 damage to each strike that we make. Not groundbreaking, but it's a start. At level 2, we'll pick up the Mage's Dedication, which gives us 2 cancers from the Arcane spell list that we don't actually need. We're only taking this as a prerequisite for Spell Strike at level 4. Spell Strike is the undisputed king of burst damage, and while this archetype feat can only be used once per minute, that hardly matters for our purposes. Similarly, levels 5 through 8 don't give us any direct damage boosts either, but they do provide feats that will become prerequisites for feats we need later. Chosen of Lamash 2 gives us the Charhide Goblin Heritage, Basic Mage's Spellcasting gives us access to spells, Adopted Ancestry allows us to pick up the Multi-Talented feat later, and the Poison Dedication gives us access to poisons that we can prepare each day, which would be helpful if we couldn't already do that with the Alchemist class. It isn't until level 9 that we get another actual damage boost with the Torch Goblin Ancestry feat, which lets us light ourselves on fire with an Alchemist Fire or a torch, adding extra fire damage to our strikes equal to the number of weapon dice on each strike. Keep in mind that to use this feat, we need to actually have an Alchemist Fire or a torch on us, meaning it's probably only Alchemists that will get access to this feat. At level 10, Poison Coat gives us one of the rare ways to inflict damage on a reaction, exposing a creature to poison whenever they hit us with a melee unarmed strike. At level 13, Expert Mage's Spellcasting upgrades our spells, and at level 14, Quietest Strikes adds Void or Vitality damage per swing. Double Poison lets us combine 2 poisons onto our weapons, doubling their lethality. Level 16 holds the honor of being the only class feat slot that is empty in this build. I couldn't find anything, despite my research, that would upgrade our damage or serve as a prerequisite for other things later. Opening this up is one of the prime spots where I could have missed something. Level 17, however, gives us the Multi-Talented Ancestry feat to pick up Exemplar Dedication for a free icon. Barrow's Edge normally adds +1 spirit damage per weapon dice, but because Bob is constantly sitting at half hit points, this bonus increases to +3, giving us +12 damage on every strike. Side note here, many people argue that Exemplars are strictly better than every other class, and I don't want to feed into that debate too much. I will say that adding this much damage on a single dedication feat feels insane. But that said, this build is looking at the absolute power ceiling and shouldn't be seen as a representative of the class as a whole. Barrow's Edge is probably the best icon for raw damage, that's true. But most fights involve rolls beyond pure DPS. Plus, the bonus only applies when the target's below half hit points, so the fight is already halfway done. This level of White Room math is fun and all, but it's quite far from the ultimate measure of game balance. Back to the build though, we finish up our spellcasting at level 18 with Master Mage's Spellcasting, and finally, at level 20, we'll get Basic Glory to split our weapon into 2, giving it the twin trait. I know it feels a little late to pick up the dual wielding feat, but trust me, this is going to do wonders for us. It's also why we didn't go dwarf in the ancestry selection. The damage bonus from twin trait is a circumstance bonus, which won't stack with the boost from telluric power. With the build out of the way, let's take a moment to cover our items and spells that we'll be bringing into this fight. Remember, we're not assuming any outside equipment beyond what the build itself can provide, so no high-ranking spell scrolls and no Apex items. Luckily, the Alchemist gets Advanced Alchemy, allowing us to repair up to 8 alchemical items every day. For this fight, we'll bring 2 energy mutagens. Normally, we can only be under the effects of 1, but thanks to our mutagenous greater field discovery, this increases the limit to 2. So as long as we pick 2 different energy types, we should be good to go. Each of these mutagens add 2d6 energy damage to each of our melee strikes. And no, the mutagens aren't actually inflicting that damage, our weapons technically are, which means they don't benefit from the burn it feat that we took at level 1. But that does open up to us the freedom to choose whatever type of energy damage that we like best. We're also bringing some poisons. Normally, we'd pick the strongest poisons available, but double poison complicates things just a little bit. To combine poisons, the poisons must sit at 2 levels lower than our actual level, immediately eliminating the big gun options like Alchemist's Kiss. Additionally, the resulting poison has the lower number of stages of the 2 poisons. For example, if we paired False Hope with Cerulean Scourge, the resulting poison would only have 3 stages, and each stage would combine its effects, which wouldn't be a problem, but stage 3 of False Hope does literally nothing, so that's obviously not ideal. Instead, we'll prepare 2 doses of Choleric Contagion and 2 doses of Cerulean Scourge. This is also why we need 2 different weapons. We can apply a poison with our first strike, then amplify that poison with our follow-up attack with the other weapon. If we only had 1 weapon, the poison would just be gone after our first attack. We will still be bringing a vial of Alchemist's Kiss, but not for our weapon. Instead, we'll apply it to our armor using our Poison Coat ability, which isn't restricted by the 2 level below our level rule. Now, onto our spells. Our Master Mage's spellcasting gives us access to 2 6th ranked and 2 7th ranked spells. We could have gotten more spells from, well, just about any other spellcasting class, but that would force us to phase out Spell Strike, which will drastically increase our damage. For our first spell, we'll pick up Haste, giving us a 4th action. This action has to be spent to strike or stride, but that's not going to matter for us. It also opens up the possibility for us to make 2 strikes and then follow up with a Spell Strike. For our buffing spells, we don't have much room, but we will take Organ Sight, which adds a huge amount of precision damage to our first strike after we cast it, and Flame Wisp, which adds a much smaller amount of fire damage, but to each strike that we make. A good runner-up option here would be Draw the Lightning, which adds a d12 of damage to our first strike, rather than 3 damage to each of the strikes that we'll make. But when we include the Burn It feat that we got from level 1, Flame Wisp actually comes out to slightly higher in damage. Finally, we of course need the spell that we're actually going to spell strike with, and for that, we'll take the King of Single Target Damage, Disintegrate. Normally, this spell is very high risk, very high reward, but under the conditions we've set up, there's no better time for it to shine. For our last pick, before we start talking numbers, we need to pick a weapon that will deliver maximum devastation. Normally, the Great Pick is my go-to weapon for maximizing damage on a single strike, but we need something that we can wield in one hand to properly make use of the twin trait on our weapons, and that double dose of poison. For that, we're going to go with the Falcata for that sweet, sweet Fatal D12 trait. Technically, these are advanced weapons, meaning they're beyond the Alchemist's normal simple weapon proficiency, but that's nothing a couple doses of the weapon proficiency feat can't fix. Plus, we don't have to worry about reduced accuracy, since our strikes are always going to land true in this thought experiment. So, that's the build. But how much damage can we actually do in one round? Let's find out. We wake up in the morning knowing today is the day that we finally give Bob what he truly deserves. We coat both of our Falcatas with a specialized poison, a mix of Choleric Contagion and Cerulean Scourge that we've made ourselves, and we apply a healthy dose of Alchemist's Kiss to our clothing. Then we head out to hunt down Bob. When we find him, we don't rush in. We play it smart. Bob has punished many fools who've dared underestimate him. We cast Haste, Organ Sight, and Flame Wisp, all while Bob stands there, menacingly. We pull out a vial of Alchemist's Fire, pour it over ourselves to light up in flames, drink both of our energy mutagens, and draw our weapons before closing into melee. Once we're in melee, we start the ultimate round. Our first strike, of course, is a critical hit with our Falcata. The Falcata's base damage is 4d12 plus 6, doubled, plus an extra d12 from the Fatal trait, totaling to 120 damage before buffs. Bob is our fated rival, adding +1 damage, doubled to +2, for a total of 122 damage. The Torch Goblin feat adds 8 damage since we're on fire, bringing that total to 130. Quiet as Strikes adds void damage for a total of 134. And Barrow's Edge contributes another 24 points of spirit damage for a total of 158 damage. Each of our energy mutagens adds 12 energy damage, doubled to 24 on a crit, raising the total to 206. Flame Wisp plus Burn It adds another 6 damage for 212. And Orchid Sight rolls maximum damage to bring the total from a single strike up to 308 points of damage. But it doesn't stop there. Bob must make a fortitude save against the poison. And of course, he critically fails, advancing directly to stage 2 of our double poison for 152 more poison damage, bringing the total damage done in the first action to 460 damage. For our second strike, we lose the bonus from Orchid Sight, but we do gain the benefit of the twin trait, which adds 8 extra damage. Plus, the combined poison on our second attack forces Bob to make another fortitude save, increasing the poison to stage 3 for 184 more poison damage, giving us a grand total of 404 damage on our second strike. Now, the third strike will be our spell strike attack, so it doesn't benefit from the poison since they've already both been used up on our first and second strike, but it does benefit from our critically successful 7th rank Disintegrate spell, adding 240 damage and bringing that total right back up to 460. Altogether, by the end of our turn, we deal a staggering 1,324 damage. But, as we said at the beginning of the video, a round is not the same thing as a turn. Now, it's Bob's turn, and rather than begging for his life, he retaliates with an unarmed strike, and by Desmond's grace, the strike succeeds. Unfortunately, that exposes Bob to Akekachek's Kiss, where he critically fails his fortitude save and results in 108 more poison damage immediately. Unwilling, or perhaps unable, to take any further actions, Bob ends his turn. But unfortunately, that doesn't save him from the poison ravaging his body. Bob has to make 2 more fortitude saves, one against the devil poison that we've created, and the other against the Akekachek's Kiss that he just took this round. Unfortunately, we already know that he critically fails both of these fortitude saves, causing the poisons to do a combined total of 316 more poison damage to him just for ending his turn, bringing our grand total of amount of poison damage you can do in one round to 1,748 damage. Now, of course, is this amount of damage practical or realistically possible? Absolutely not. The number of things that would have to go perfectly just to trigger each ability, not to mention rolling maximum damage on everything, is completely ludicrous. But as far as I know, this is the absolute maximum damage an Alchemist can do in a single round. This is one of the most fun videos I've ever made, and I'm excited to see how it stacks up against other classes. I really didn't expect, starting with Alchemist, a class that I've always considered to be more on the supportive side of things, the numbers would climb this high, this fast. So, if you've had nearly as much fun watching this video as I had making it, please hit that subscribe button so you can see more. We make 2 videos every week, and if you think we've missed something, let us know in the comments. I'll keep track of the comments and keep updated if anyone manages to beat our numbers, provided they explain how, of course. But that's all we have for today. Until next time, keep rolling high, but probably not as high as we did in this video, and we'll catch you in the next one.